Welcome to part 3 of this series on getting realistic about what the actual F we trying beings are. Today I've got to make good on my promise of a strictly chemical explanation for how trying beings could ever emerge within nothing but physical chemistry. You'll be pleased to know it's not hard chemistry at all. Completely intuitive and simple. Either that or you'll be skeptical that it's not hard chemistry. I mean, to top all the other competing theories pitched over the millennia, it'd have to be something that eluded great minds, something esoteric, counterintuitive, and beyond your comprehension, right? Well, maybe so. You'll decide. Here are a few reasons why it's likely to be simple. First, it's not rocket science. Rockets are engineered. I'm assuming nothing engineered the first trying beings. To assume some being or force engineered life is like saying that the first trying beings were created by prior trying beings. Second, it's not porcupine hair. Remember, Terrence Deacon, the originator of this theory, argues that explaining life starting with human consciousness is like trying to explain hair starting with the highly specialized and evolved porcupine quills. My explanation can't even assume evolution since only trying beings evolve. I can't even start with replicating DNA. As I'll explain in a minute, DNA or RNA is not a blueprint unless it's utilized by a trying being. Besides, the process by which DNA or RNA is interpreted, even by the simplest known organism, is way too complicated and evolved to be the origin of trying beings. And finally, maybe, just maybe, there's something simple that has eluded us all and made us assume it must be complicated. In the last video, I alluded to what has eluded us. Super simple, obvious, and yet overlooked. Changes in relative concentrations result in changes in likely and unlikely paths of least resistance. Okay, the story so far. I'm assuming a universe comprised of nothing but space, time, energy, and matter, which for this explanation I'll assume is molecules in motion, nothing quantum or atomic. I won't have to go any smaller than molecules, though obviously one could get into far more detail. I described the first law of everything. Matter and energy are never created or destroyed, but everywhere dissipates in space over time. So if that's all there is, how could there ever be us trying beings sustaining our own individual order, not dissipating over billions of years? To corner yourself with this challenge, try this. We have to preserve food to keep it from rotting. Okay, so food was once alive. So how come we don't have to preserve living beings to keep them from rotting? Because trying beings try to keep themselves from rotting, which, by the way, you're doing at this very moment. Today, unconsciously, you'll generate 330 billion cells to replace cells that, my condolences, rotted or at least degenerated. Whether you stick with this tediously dry video or veg out watching Family Guy instead, you slouchy couch potato, in a half hour, you'll have generated 7 billion cells. You're not such a slouch after all. I'll start with 3 basic scientific hunches about how life started. Those working on the chemical origins of life fall into 3 main categories. Some think life must have started with molecules replicating themselves, especially some special information-bearing molecules like RNA or DNA. They're called information firsters on the assumption that a replicating molecule is replicating information. Metabolism firsters assume it can't just be a single replicating molecule type. You need a chemical reaction that in effect eats some kinds of molecules and produces other kinds of molecules. And then there are the containment firsters, who note that those molecules produced by metabolism would just dissipate if they weren't somehow contained. So life would have to have started with some cell membrane. I want to kick the tires first on the information-first approach because it's the most popular in what's called the RNA world hypothesis. Lots of scientists talk as though life is just replicating DNA. But remember what I said about information. It's one of those magical mystery metaphoric ethereal materials I don't get to smuggle in. And yet researchers smuggle it in all the time. Just like we do in everyday life, like when we talk about passing information on to someone like it's some invisible basketball. Information is real, but even top researchers equivocate about what it is. So let me unequivocate it in a way that tucks me tighter into my explanatory corner. What is information? Well, look at the word. Inform. Like information is simply form being passed from one bit of matter to another. And what is form? It's our old friend, relative concentrations and dissipations of matter or energy. This is something Aristotle figured out. Matter can take on different forms, and the same form can be transferred to different matter. A donut is a form, meaning there are relatively likely and unlikely places to find matter with respect to each other. Matter is likely in the donut ring. There's unlikely to be matter in the center. A donut machine imposes a donut's form on different bits of dough matter. There's no form that isn't instantiated in matter, and there's no matter that doesn't have some form or another. So one way researchers think about information is simply form transferred from one bit of matter to another. You can transfer the form of a donut from the donut maker to the dough, to a photograph, to a geometrical software program, to a 3D printer. As you transfer the form around, it's never immaterial. And as you transfer it, you maintain some representation of the relative presences and absences of matter with respect to each other. Aristotle challenged Plato on this point because Plato, his teacher for 21 years, thought that there were perfect immaterial forms that get transferred into matter. No, really, he talked as if pure forms exist in some immaterial realm. That form gets stamped into matter like donuts stamped out of a supernatural donut-making machine. Platonic love, for example. At Plato's symposium, which is a fancy word for sitting around drinking wine and talking about the nature of love, we get the concept of pure ideal love as transcending sexuality. And where does pure love exist? In this other ethereal, immaterial realm that gets informed imperfectly into everyday love, where sex is one of its imperfections. Laugh at that all you want, I do, but really that's a pretty intuitive and popular approach to form and information that both Aristotle and I reject, even though most researchers still assume that hunch. Researchers often assume everything in the universe is information in interaction, everything is passing form from one bit of matter to another. Leaving a hot cup of coffee on a wooden table without a coaster, you might inform the table with a donut-shaped stain. Immaterial form transfer or transformation isn't what, in practice, we actually mean by information. The informing of the table with a stain is potential information. It only becomes information when it's about something for some self trying to do something. For example, when your housemate is disappointed that you stained the table they were hoping to sell to buy food so they could survive. They might interpret the stain for hints about who should fix it. You, dude, and next time get a coaster. Here I'm arguing that we need to make a distinction between potential information and information. Every transformation is potential information. It only becomes information when it's interpreted by someone as about something for their effort. It's an important overlooked distinction between cause and effect phenomena and means to ends interpretive behavior. A stop sign doesn't cause you to stop unless you crash into it. You stop at a stop sign because you interpret it as about traffic for your effort to stay alive. There's a big overlooked difference between cause and effect and interpretation. Researchers ignore that difference lots, as we all do, for example, when we say that something we heard caused us to think. Again, like words were some invisible basketball that whacked us in the head. Here, try this. Suppose there's some sterile planet on which there's a crater left where a meteor struck. That's form transfer, right? But the planet is sterile. No trying beings to interpret the crater as about anything for their effort. Form transfer is potential information that only becomes real information when it's interpreted by and for some trying being about its circumstances, trying to make some kind of functional effort. So back to the RNA world hypothesis. What do you get when you populate a sterile planet with a bunch of replicating DNA or RNA molecules? A sterile planet. That's the problem with the popular information-first approach to the origins of life. In every chemical reaction, there's form transfer, potential information that could be interpreted by a trying being. I don't get to equivocate about information. I don't get to call form transfer information. It's potential information. What kinds of entities can interpret? Only trying beings, entities that try to make functional interpretive effort. In my framing, there are 4 qualities that are not present in inanimate phenomena. Trying beings are selves that make functional interpretive effort. That's 4 traits: selves, function, interpretation, and effort. They make no sense without each other. Only beings try. Effort is work by a self for the self. Even if you think everything in the universe is functional for God or some higher power, you're assuming a supernatural being trying to achieve something. In a future video, I'll be able to explain why we humans imagine gods or higher powers as the idealization of all 4 of those traits: perfect selves making perfect functional interpretive effort. That is, gods are all-knowing, all-functional, useful or good, all-powerful, and all-one, like an integrated perfect being. I've got to explain how those 4 traits emerge together within nothing but physical chemistry, molecules doing work on each other, which means I have to explain trying beings strictly in terms of that physical work. Functional effort is work that works. To do what? Most fundamentally, what all trying beings do: struggle to regenerate themselves faster than they would otherwise degenerate. In short, I've got to explain work that works to keep trying beings working in their local workspace. Work that works to keep a chemical system working in its workspace. Every workspace is different, but all workspaces are subject to degeneration, the second law of thermodynamics, the first law of everything, or flow as an acronym. The first and top priorities for trying beings are protecting against degeneration and regenerating what degenerates. Self-protection and self-repair. It's not replication or baby making. After all, a trying being can't replicate if it's degenerated. If someday you want to have kids, you're working on it when you regenerate those 330 billion cells daily. Despite the popularity of the information-first approach in what's called the RNA world models, I'm going to set it aside because that's not work that works to keep a chemical system working in its workspace. I mean, you can picture a molecule as trying to get copied and even say that it's information since its form is moving from molecule to molecule. But animism comes easy to humans. You can say a river is trying to get to the sea. Okay, so we've still got 2 more theories in play: metabolism first and containment first. The metabolism that's most interesting to researchers is called autocatalysis. It's a chemical chain reaction. Catalysts are molecules that transform other molecules without being transformed in the process. With autocatalysis, you get catalysts that transform other molecules into more catalysts. The result is a population explosion of catalysts. To simplify, you've got catalysts of type A and type B. A's turn other molecules into B's, and B's turn other molecules into A's. Every time they do that, there are more A's and B's to turn still more molecules into A's and B's. The production of both types accelerate until there are no more other molecules to transform. Then what do you have? Well, a lot of free-floating catalysts A and B that dissipate. The farther they spread apart from each other, the less likely they are to resume a chain reaction. Yeah, it sort of looks like metabolism. The catalysts are eating the other molecules and growing what researchers call the autocatalytic set, those catalysts A and B. But it only looks like a set to the outside observer. It's actually just free-floating molecules floating away from each other, like milk molecules floating away from each other when poured into coffee. Which again is why we'd be interested in the membrane-first approach, a bag to hold these molecules together. Except membranes are subject to that same damn problem, the first law of everything. There are bags in physical chemistry, for example, soap bubbles or molecules that chemists call capsids. Pour a bunch of capsids into water and they form shells that enclose viral DNA. Viruses don't have to construct these shells any more than you have to construct soap bubbles. They just fall toward regularized form, which should raise a question in your curious mind. Wait, Jeremy, just wait a darn minute. I thought you said that order falls toward disorder. And here you are talking about soap bubbles and capsid molecules falling toward order. I thought you'd never ask. The first law of everything, or flow, applies to both energy and matter. Remember, I said that if you pour a box of toothpicks into water, it will fall toward unalignment. Remember, flow is called the second law of thermodynamics, thermal meaning energy. With capsids or bubbles, it's the energy that's dissipating. It's like crystals, order that forms when you dissipate the energy. For example, the regularities that form when you cool down water below freezing. Okay, but here's the thing. Like the molecules in the so-called autocatalytic set, bubbles and capsids are great containment, but they break and dissipate too, unlikely to recoalesce into membranes. Enough background. If it's not already way too much background, which I'm sorry, I'm trying to keep this as simple as possible, no simpler. I'm finally ready to give you Terry Deacon's model for how within nothing but simple chemistry you could ever get work that works to keep a chemical system working in its workspace. Autocatalysis often produces byproduct molecules. For example, say catalyst A splits some other molecule. One piece of that other molecule becomes catalyst B. The other part isn't a catalyst, it's just a byproduct. Now, what if that byproduct happened to be a capsid molecule? In the midst of the population explosion of A's and B's, you've got these capsid shells forming, encapsulating some of the A's and B's before they dissipate. Nothing's happening in that shell. It's like a seed that captures and preserves what's in effect an autocatalytic starter kit. The seed drifts away and maybe gets broken open by bumping into something or entering some other temperature region that dissolves it. If it breaks, then you've got these free-floating molecules that just drift away. But if it happens to break open in the presence of those other molecules that the catalysts transform, the chain reaction could resume, producing more A's and B's and capsid molecule byproducts. Terry's model is basically a chain reaction that produces chain reaction seeds that, if broken open in the right workspace, regenerate more chain reaction seeds. The shell protects against degeneration. The chain reaction regenerates what has degenerated. Autocatalysis by itself dissipates, but the seeds keep enough catalyst together that they're more likely to resume autocatalysis rather than just dissipate with nothing to show for it. Capsid shells by themselves tend to break down with the capsid molecules just dissipating, but autocatalysis replenishes the supply of capsid molecules. Together, these two processes prevent each other from ending. They prevent the second law of degeneration. They keep each other in check, making less likely their flow toward degeneration. What you've got here is the simplest possible checks and balances system, which should be called balanced checks if it didn't sound like accounting. Keep that in mind. Balanced checks or limitations are a pain in the ass. They're also the only way you could ever sustain fragile systems like us trying beings, or for that matter, governments. But that's a story for another video. Terry's model should raise a question in your curious mind. Wait, Jeremy, just wait one darn minute. I thought you said that autocatalysis by itself is just a bunch of free-floating molecules, not some set except in the eye of the beholder. Yet here you are claiming that autocatalysis is actually a trying being, or at least part of a trying being's life cycle. Not only that, you also said that trying beings aren't physical objects, and yet in the seed phase of this life cycle, it's dormant, like a physical object, like a solid. Thank you. I thought you'd never ask. One commenter commented rightly on my last video that it seemed fatuous for me to claim that materialists don't admit that there's space between matter. My reply was that they do and they don't. Of course, if asked point blank whether they know there's space between stuff, they'd say sure. Still, there's something about humans and language that makes us pay attention to what does happen, not what doesn't, and to what does exist, not what doesn't, and to assume that only things matter. Like, if something is alive, it's got to be a thing or maybe a non-thing thingy added to matter. Like maybe it's a soul thingy or that invisible basketball called information. What doesn't happen, or what doesn't exist, has been a huge source of insights in science. Darwin explained adapted fitness by paying attention to the unfit beings that try but die. Boltzmann explained the second law of thermodynamics by paying attention to the relative unlikeliness of order. Information theory, from which we get the concept of bits and bytes, is about possibilities not actualized. Like a flip of a coin is one bit of information, one actuality from two possibilities. Process of elimination, like 20 questions. If it's heads, it means the elimination of tails. Self-organization theory, from which we discovered such temporary order as autocatalysis and capsid shell formation, is also about what's unlikely to happen. One of its founders, W. Ashby, said a self-organizing system spontaneously reduces the number of its possible states. None of these theories explain what the actual fuck we are, but this business about how the likely becomes unlikely is an important hint here. Terry calls his model Autogenics, or self-regeneration. He calls his chain reaction that produces chain reaction seeds an autogen. We're likely to think of the autogen as the enclosed seed phase. After all, trying beings today are all bagged up in membranes. But that's the old materialist intuition. An autogen is not a thing, but a reduction in possibilities, the unlikelification of dissipation. Life at its simplest and most fundamental is death prevention. When the seed is broken open, it spills its guts, those free-floating catalysts, but with a little difference that makes a big difference. It's a chain reaction of free-floating molecules that is unlikely to just dissipate because it's spitting out those capsid molecule byproducts that tend to coalesce into shells that keep some free-floating molecules together long enough that should the shell break open, it makes autocatalysis more likely to resume. The autogen isn't the chain reaction or the seed. It's a tendency that works against the tendency to degenerate. It's the unlikelification of ending. As such, we're back to what I said in the last video about a living being as a congestion that channels matter and energy into effort to regenerate the congestion it is. I'm quite confident that that is what I am, and that when I die, my self-regenerative work will be done. The molecules I had in my Last Supper will dissipate with no return 3 days later, like Jesus after his Last Supper. And yes, I know the autogen doesn't look like much. Certainly nothing like you with your elaborate, enclosed, human, emotional, conscious, porcupine hair experience. I'll get there. I'll get to how we could have evolved our porcupine quill bells and whistles. There's a lot left to explain for those who care and dare to wonder what the actual fuck we are. In the meantime, remember your mission if you choose to accept it. Call me out on any smoke and mirror, hand-waving, ethereal, material BS I might be trying to pull here. If you think I've smuggled something in, do let me know in the comments, and I thought you'd never ask. Hey, thanks for wondering with me. Like, subscribe, comment, and one more. Email me for a free trial half-hour strategic consulting session. Not bottomless psychotherapy or pep talk coaching, but cut to the chase, help navigating your next moves on anything, but especially on getting your mind back from some nagging doubt or some jerk who keeps jerking you around. Thanks.